Hey everyone, and welcome to the Zelda Informer podcast. I believe we're on episode 14. I don't know, I've been losing count lately. This week, we have our usual co-host, Mr. Alfred.
Hello.
And a special guest, Josh McDougall, also known as Really Freaking Clever.
Hello, hi.
But I'm sure you guys have seen some of his stuff on YouTube. We've also done interviews with him, and he's been on other stuff with us in the past.
I dabble.
He dabbles. So we're going to get right into it this week. A couple interesting things going on. Our only Zelda-specific topic, because this is a Zelda podcast, so I like to make sure we always start off with Zelda.
For the most part.
Zelda.
So a former developer on the CD-i Zelda games. Yes, those games. He kind of came out of the woodwork in an interview with Game Informer and talked about a bunch of things. A whole bunch of happenings that went on back in the day when these CD-i games were being made. He was one of the lead people for the Hotel Mario. So he had more to do with that than the Zelda games, but he also helped with the development of the Zelda games. And according to him, Nintendo liked what they saw.
Oh.
And Nintendo approved of everything for these games. Which kind of leads me to, it was probably like Hyrule Warriors in the sense, like nothing was going to happen in those games unless Nintendo lets it happen.
Yeah.
And that's kind of was the deal here. Now, obviously, for people who don't know, like there was a contract thing, and like Philips had the right to develop these even without Nintendo's permission. However, they still needed Nintendo's permission to use the characters. Otherwise, all they could use is like the name, The Legend of Zelda. They couldn't actually use any of the copyrighted IP. So Nintendo had to approve everything. They had some hard times with the art design for it. And they sent Nintendo a whole bunch of concepts, and like 2 of the concepts got scrapped by Nintendo. So like proof that Nintendo was looking at this stuff and was approving it.
Yeah.
Because they scrapped some of it. And so what's interesting here is oftentimes like Nintendo gets no blame for these games existing, even though they kind of, I don't know how, sorry for the language, they bitched out on Philips. And they did the same thing to Sony before. Like anyone who was like, yeah, we're going to do CD stuff with Nintendo, they're like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And then we just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So Sony, obviously, everyone knows that story. They went off, they created the PlayStation, and that's become like the biggest success in the company's history.
Yeah.
And now, Philips tried the same thing with their own Philips CD-i system. Totally bombed. It wasn't very good. But the most high-profile games on it were the Hotel Mario and the 3 Zelda games. And to me, it's interesting that Nintendo, like this person's name, let me just throw his name out there so people know. It's Stefan Rodash, or Radash, something like that. He claims that Nintendo could have made this very, very difficult. And he said, I still had to get approval from Nintendo on everything we did because they were their trademark characters, and anyone who owns the trademark characters will tell you, oh, sorry about that, you don't want Link, this is his example. As an example, they could not have Link having sex with Zelda on the ramparts of the castle. It's a really weird mindset from this specific person. And he went on to say that Miyamoto had to have seen everything because everything was still under Nintendo's control. The meetings were short, amicable, fun, lots of laugh. Talked about going through issues with the characters and picking out the animation styles. They ended up having Russian animators, or the ones that ended up doing all those things people have seen on YouTube, poop and all that stuff. He essentially said Nintendo Japan continued to be non-problematic, which to me was an indication that they really did like the games, because if they didn't like them, they had every opportunity to throw up as many roadblocks along the way as they wanted to, which would have essentially made the games never get released. So, for starters, Nintendo could have stopped all of this. There could have never been Zelda CD-i. Apparently, Nintendo, after Hotel Mario, in this interview, if you go read the original game form, we'll put a link down in the description, he says that Nintendo kind of stopped them from doing another Mario game, because they had another Mario game in development. So Nintendo clearly could have stopped all this, and they didn't. So, as the story goes, no one blames Nintendo for these games existing, but Nintendo kind of deserves some blame. It sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Because it sounds like they had every chance to not approve of this stuff and never let it get developed. So this brings up an interesting point because Nintendo now is spreading out. They're branching out. They're letting more and more like third-party companies deal with their IP. They just had Tantalus do the Twilight Princess HD. Mm-hmm. And they had Hyrule Warriors developed in with Koei Tecmo. So, does Nintendo need to be? I mean, was this like a lesson Nintendo learned, and maybe this is why they weren't willing to work with third parties for so long with their IP, or was this just Nintendo legit thought these were good games?
It's interesting because at the very end of the interview, he says the internet was around. There were bulletin boards. We got really positive responses. The game sold really well, especially Hotel Mario. Sold for years after the company went out of business. And so that's a little confusing to me because, I mean, first off, I don't think I was around when these games were really released. I mean, I was born the year that Zelda's Adventure was released, 1994. So I wasn't like around when the height of these games' popularity, if you would call it that. But I mean, it's weird to think that they did they were considered like they did well, and obviously at some point one of them did well because they made 3 of them. So it wasn't like, oh well, this one's a critical failure. Let's make 2 more and see if we get it right. It's like, well, people thought that this was good enough to make 2 more games. Which is interesting.
I just looked up on Wikipedia because I was thinking about that too. Like they made 3 of the Zelda games. Apparently, Faces of Evil and Wanda Gamelon came out the same time. Like it was a simultaneous release.
Yeah, it was like an Oracle of Agents, Oracle of Seasons situation.
Okay.
And then Zelda's Adventure came out 8 months later. But they would have been working on all 3 at the same time. That's like a lot of faith Nintendo put in them. If they were make 3 Zelda games for us.
Well, I don't think, I'm thinking back to those days. I don't think Nintendo was telling Philips to make anything. I think Philips, Nintendo kind of backed out of the contract, but there were stipulations in the back out about the IP. And Philips is like, look, we're going to make a bunch of your IP with a bunch of games with your IP, but you still have to approve of it. So, Nintendo obviously has really high standards with a lot of, especially like their core IP. They have a lot of high standards with anybody who's going to touch that. That's not internal Nintendo. I'm really sorry, Paper Mario fans. They really screwed you over the years. But again, this is a third-party studio. It's not internal. So,
but it is interesting to note that this was like a year that they experimented with handing out their IPs to other people because I think right before this came out, the Super Mario Brothers film came out. Same year, 1993. All of these were released around, within, that was May, and Faces of Evil came out, Faces of Evil and Wand of Gamelon came out in October. And so there was a little bit of a buffer between them, but obviously not enough for them to be like, no, we don't want to do this anymore. It's already been in production, so let's get the game out. And oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, that's also, the same time that Donkey Kong Country would have come out. That was 94.
Yep.
So they tested out a bunch of these possibilities, and if you've ever read the story on the Super Mario Brothers movie, Game Informer also did a write-up about that at the end of one of their I don't remember which edition it was. I'm sure if you looked up Super Mario Brothers film, Game Informer, you could find it. But it was a terrible process. The movie started out really well, it sounded like a Mario Brothers film, and then they hired these 2 people that came in that had they were like, but what if we did it in a dystopian future society? And they were like, that sounds great. That's exactly what I look for in a Mario game. And so they went ahead and rewrote the film and did that, and we all know how well that movie did. And that kind of, it seemed like this venture into third parties handling their IPs and how poorly a lot of those were received kind of shut Nintendo off for a very, very, very long time for stuff like this. And it's interesting that in the interview he said that Nintendo liked what they saw, or that they approved of it, and that they were like, okay, yeah, this is good enough to send out to market. And apparently they did well at some point. There was a positive response to them.
I think the whole the game sold really well. To to me, I think it's really well relative to how well the CDI was doing.
Yeah.
Because it was definitely not doing well compared to the actual big brand. Like Sega was doing way better, with Sonic and stuff at the time than was going on with these. But like, I think comparative to how many, it's kind of like the Wii U. Like comparative to what the Wii U sold, there's a whole bunch of Wii U games that actually have a high attach rate and sold well. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't actually mean that it's good. And if I don't know if you guys have ever tried using a CDI before, it's terrible. The controls are. It's mostly the controls. Like it's just the controller is. Oh. I think last time I used one, I had to get 7 different controllers before I got one where all the buttons worked.
Yeah, I tried playing an actual CDI at a convention once, and it was like, no, I have no idea what's happening. I tried emulating one once to try and do a video. I was going to do a Zelda CDI video, and not touching that. It was crazy.
And like today, there's a lot of fun made of the animations. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, that kind of animation wasn't that unusual.
Well,
just look at the cartoons at the time. Like even the Sonic show and the Super Mario Brothers show, like all that stuff was really, really corny.
Well, it was marketed at younger kids, though. You can't discount the fact that it wasn't made for like adult audiences. Sure. I mean, and you could say that the
Zelda cartoon.
Yeah. Well, the Super Mario Brothers film was, I guess they tried to appeal to every audience there.
Yeah, and they were trying to be edgy.
They were like,
it was trying to be edgy.
You know what 2 series I always think of together? Super Mario Brothers and 1984 by George Orwell. Those are the 2 things that always go well enough for me. And then they put those together, and that's what you get.
Yeah, and see, it's one of those movies I think is so bad it's good.
Yeah, it's something...
I really like that movie. It's one of my favorite movies from my childhood. Even when I go back and watch it, I'm like, man, this is not very good. I'm still entertained.
You have to watch it at least once in your life. Like, it's something that you have to do. You can't you can't die without watching the Super Mario Brothers movie. That's
you can't die.
You can't die. Even if you're about to die, you've never seen it. You have to watch it.
You put that on.
Yeah, that's the last memory you have is of that movie.
You're on your deathbed. You better put it. Final request. Forget the last meal. All right, so we're gonna kind of move on from that because we can talk about the goofy early '90s for a long time. That was my childhood, so
yeah.
I could really talk about that for a long time. All the crazy stuff back then. The Pogs.
So many Pogs.
Oh, Pogs. So this past week, it's been an interesting one in terms of the NX, especially if you like NX rumors.
My favorite.
There's now. What's interesting is I think Nintendo actually just announced like a Nintendo Direct, but it's for 3DS games.
Yeah,
so,
they had to specifically point out we're still not announcing this yet.
Still not talking about the NX. Like,
this is for our old thing.
Yeah, we're going to announce it this year, but
not at this event.
We all know that the next Nintendo Direct totally has to be for the 3DS. Because what makes it even weirder is they did that and then they showed off the new Galaxy version of the 3DS.
Yeah,
that's so weird.
It's like okay, like you have new hardware coming out, but let's just ignore that and be like, look, we have a new skin for our current hardware, and we're having a Nintendo Direct, but we already announced the big hardware.
I wouldn't really call that a big hardware announcement.
Yeah, but for Nintendo it is.
Yeah, I know, but that's kind of sad to call that a big hardware announcement.
The weird thing for me, it's like, okay, like they're going to make a new 3DS color, like push a few more units out before like the NX takes over the news. But it was weird to me how much effort they put into promoting that. Like they had Reggie in the video. Yeah, Reggie hasn't been in anything since like E3.
Yeah, it felt like a Nintendo Direct announcement, to be honest.
It felt like they were announcing a brand new system, but they weren't.
Who knows? Maybe they're going to surprise everyone, and Super Mario Galaxy is now in the 3DS from the event or something. Who knows?
But hey, we got some
to go with the Galaxy.
We got some A-quality acting from Reggie though, which is always great.
It's entertaining at least. So speaking of Reggie, we'll get into some stuff about the NX here that isn't necessarily a rumor so much as it is Reggie just letting us know that they need to do better with the NX.
I saw this.
Yes, so in an interview with A-List, they asked him, about Nintendo being in dire straits after the GameCube failed to find an audience, the Wii exploded. Is there any lessons you can learn from the Wii U that are being applied to NX? And then Reggie went on to say that every time we launch a new platform, Every time we launch a new critical game, we always learn. We always do our breakdown of what worked, what didn't, and certainly what we've done that with the Wii U, and we continue to believe the innovation of the second screen was a worthwhile concept. The games that we've launched on the Wii U are hugely compelling. Splatoon, Super Mario Maker, Smash Bros. Bayonetta 2, Super Mario Game, The Legend of Zelda. Arguably, if you lined up all of the single-platform games for Wii U and the 2 other platforms, we have by far the most unique games that are highly rated by consumers and highly rated by media, so those things worked. So, yeah, the Wii U sucked, but, hey, it's great. Anyways, so here's where he gets into the NX. One of the things we have to do better when we launch the NX is we have to do a better job communicating the positioning for the product. We have to do a better job helping people understand its uniqueness and what that means for the game playing experience. And we have to do a better job from a software planning standpoint to have a continuous beat of great new games that are motivating more and more people to pick up the hardware and more people to pick up the software. These are critical lessons, and as I verbalize them, they need to be traditional lessons within the industry. You have to make sure people understand the concept. You have to make sure they have a great library of games, and when you do that, you tend to do well. So, a few things to this quote. For starters, Reggie does his very best job to spin that the Wii U is awesome.
But he pretty much named every game that's come out for the Wii U that you'd want. And like he could name them.
That's a little unfair. That's a little unfair.
I'm just saying.
It's funny you put the Legend of Zelda in there. There hasn't been anything but remakes.
Well, you get Hyrule Warriors, you get the remake, so
yeah. It's a Super Mario game. Maybe that's why they named because you know it's like New Super Mario Bros. U.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why they changed Mario Maker to Super Mario Maker, so they could just reference it all as one thing. Super Mario. Anyways, so beyond the fact that he basically says they learned lessons from the Wii U. There's a couple of things in here I find encouraging. One, that he does talk about the communicating and positioning for the product. That was a mess with the Wii U.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That was where they screwed us.
I remember it was announced. It said this is a Wii, but it's for you, the gamers. I'm like, okay.
Well, like that E3, we didn't know if it was a console or a controller. Like that's all I remember taking away from that.
Literally in the past month, I've had to explain what a Wii U is to someone. The console's been out for like 4 years now, and there's some people that still don't know that it's a separate thing from the Wii. Like that, their marketing and just getting the idea across has been terrible.
Yep. So I'm glad that they recognize that was bad. I mean, it's probably the worst I've ever seen any company that's this big do with a product launch. I remember when it was announced, before the gamepad was even a thing, we didn't even know what it was. This console was marketed originally as a hardcore gamer machine that was going to have all the third-party support and had an unprecedented partnership with EA.
Mm-hmm.
A year later, they capped their E3 with Nintendo Land. So now, at that point, the general consumer base, which the hardcore fans were already following along, kind of knew that EA was already kind of bailed out, as did some others. But if you were just someone that just watched the big media events, here you might be like, oh, this big, huge gaming machine's coming out from Nintendo. It's going to compete now with the new systems coming out from Sony and Microsoft. And then, it ends with Nintendo Land and, 0 big hitting games during that E3. There was nothing to really get excited about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, yeah, by the way, the system comes out in 4 months. It's like, what? There's nothing. And what you're showing me is stuff that it almost looks like you're trying to repeat the Wii. And that's the complete opposite messaging you had when you announced the system. Yeah, but that's not what they were doing when they announced the system.
I know. But I feel like
back then, I think they were caught off guard, too, because they were like, look, we could just release the same consoles as the competitors for the 360 and PS3 have, and we're going to get all the support.
I think the problem, I think
it was a bad idea.
We've talked about this before, but I think that one of the reasons why it was also named the Wii was because of how successful the Wii was, the Wii U.
Sure.
And so they wanted to ride that as far as they could because
of course they did.
The thing is that I'll mention this pretty much every time we talk about advertising for Nintendo. I don't think there was any better advertising than those We Would Like to Play commercials.
Oh,
because
so good.
It showed off the game, showed off the mechanics. And it was memorable. It had a slogan. It had that's how Nintendo should do marketing again for whatever console this is. But I felt like with the Wii U, they were like, well, you remember the Wii? Well, we're coming out with something that's not the Wii, but we're naming it the Wii U. And so it's not really the same thing, but you can kind of use the same controllers, and it has a different controller for it, but it's not the same thing. and we're not really going to advertise it except for like maybe on 2 Just Dance commercials, and then you're going to have to go find it.
Also, whoever came up with the name needs to be shot.
I know.
I think because essentially what this system is, we know that it's basically a slightly beefed up Xbox 360, and I think what they should have done is just called it Wii HD.
Yeah.
Done with it. There is no confusion. It plays all your Wii games. All the new games that come out for it are in HD. You could still use all your Wiimotes. It's still all Wii branding. And if they were going to do that, ideally they would have released it in 2010 instead of 2 years later, when it still would have had 3 or 4 years on the market with the 360 and PlayStation 3, instead of 1 year until the new consoles came out. Again, a timing of release for what the console actually was. Just a big flub on Nintendo's. And it's actually weird because all these people that hate Michael Pachter was calling for them to basically do what the Wii U is like 2 years before they did it. And I think if they had released it just when, because the Wii started coming down towards the end of 2009, and into 2010, and if right at the end of 2010 they had refreshed it with a Wii HD, that would have been like brilliance by Nintendo. Because like now we can get all those third-party games for the next 3 years. Because now we have a system that's just like everyone else.
Now you have like the Assassin's Creed
with free online,
yeah,
which is cool too. Obviously there's been issues with their universal account systems and all that stuff, but reality is they would have had hardware-wise something competitive with the rest of the market that also builds on top of the Wii brand that sold 100 million units.
I think
Nintendo really flubbed with that. But yeah, I'm sorry. Go on.
The problem that I always have when talking about like comparing them to other companies is you get into the quotes that they always say is like, we're not competing, like we're not trying to compete with them. It's like, I can understand why you don't want to compete, like, or you don't want to make this a competition, or you want to stand out from the crowd, but at this point you really can't afford not to compete. Like, it's people want something powerful, something that they'll get their money's worth for, and I think a lot of people still feel cheated with the Wii U. A lot of people feel like they didn't get what they were promised, they didn't get what they wanted, like especially with the fact that Breath of the Wild is coming out so late and is becoming a cross-release game for the NX, and it's definitely going to be an infinitely better game on the NX. Like, it's probably going to run smoother. Well, it's going to run smoother. It's probably not going to have as big of a like.
I'm hoping that it runs better.
I'm hoping it does.
I'm a little nervous with the handheld concept for NX right now.
Yeah, but I'm just still hoping that, like, I think that's a lot of people are upset because, you know, a lot of people on Zelda Informer, a lot of fans bought the Wii U for the Zelda game that they were promised, like way back when the Wii U was first announced with the E3 tech demo.
Or when if they didn't buy it then, when the Wind Waker HD came out.
Yeah,
like hey, look, we can get it for this, but we know a big Zelda game's coming.
And it was kind of a slap in the face to people that stayed with Nintendo for that long. And we talked about this a long time ago, that Nintendo still needs to buy back the trust and the respect of the gamers that they lost, and that they kind of not cheated out of their money, but like a lot of people do feel cheated. And so it's going to be really difficult, really interesting to see how they get those people back on board with them, because I know there are a lot of people that are like, well, you know, why would I get a lower powered console? Like, yeah, I love Nintendo games, but I could get like a PS4, PS4 Neo, and get all these first party, second party games, and then all of the third party games as well. And you know, I personally think at this moment in time, the PS4 is the best console on the market in terms of power. But we talked about games and stuff like that last time. But it's the strongest seller. It's the strongest, like, hardware-wise. And it's really difficult to say, well, you should buy a Wii U. It's like, well, why? It's like, well, because it's got, like, Mario Kart and Smash Brothers. But there's really not a lot else on there.
I will vouch for Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze till the
day
I die.
Yeah.
Till the day I die.
I really like Pikmin 3 a lot.
But those aren't system seller games. That's the problem. Like, they're great games. Yeah. They're highly underrated.
Sure.
But they're not like, you don't tell non-gaming friend or like non-Nintendo friends, hey, you should buy a Wii U for Pikmin 3 or for Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze.
Well, yeah. In the counter argument, and Nintendo kind of brings this up himself, Reggie here in his quotes. What does the PlayStation 4 have that's a system seller?
Well, I'd say, and again, this is kind of the same thing. A lot of those games came out late, like Uncharted 4.
Yeah, but it was still, the system was already selling before that.
I know. It's again, that's interesting to see how like they really didn't have a system set up.
I remember I had a debate about this a while back with someone, and I said the PlayStation 4 essentially has sold on promises.
Yeah.
Rather than
There's
actually delivering on the promises.
Well, it's delivered on most of them.
And it's delivered on some. I wouldn't even say most. If you look at what they have Bloodborne, and they have
so
Uncharted 4, both really awesome games. That's 2 titles in 4 years.
Yeah, that's like I think
that's like not delivering to me. They have third-party games. They're being carried by third-party games.
Yeah.
Well, we talked last week about all the big PS4 games that came out that were like the PS4 exclusives, and there are a lot of good ones.
A lot of them are still to come.
Yeah, but there's still a lot that are. I mean, there's still a lot that are good, but for every good one, there was an infamous Second Son. So take that how you will. And sorry, anybody like the game? I hated the game. It was awful.
I thought it was okay, but it we can go on and on obviously about games, and I'm not here trying to like put Sony down. I really want The Last Guardian bad. Yeah. I'm too hyped for it. It's no way it's gonna live up to the hype. I want Kingdom Hearts 3. No way it's gonna live up to the hype.
But guys, you get No Man's Sky for PS4. It's exclusive.
Oh, what a big letdown. I'm so glad that I almost bought a PlayStation 4 for it, and I'm so glad I didn't. So let's move on to some of the more juicy stuff. So I'm kind of glad that Reggie recognized that they do need to do a better job communicating, and that they have to do better with software planning, which actually falls in line with what Nintendo's president of Japan, Kimishima, said earlier this year when he said that it was releasing in March instead of releasing this holiday because they needed to make sure that first year of software kept hitting with big titles more consistently than, say, the Wii U, when the Wii U had a nice 9-month drought.
Multiple times.
The 3DS had like if you don't count Ocarina of Time 3D, it basically had a 9-month drought itself to start.
Oh yeah,
and
that's what
I don't count Ocarina of Time 3D because again, remakes are they're filler. They're not really. I mean, obviously Ocarina of Time 3D helped sell the 3DS during the summer, but it just isn't.
Well, that's why they did the whole ambassador program too. Remember?
Yeah. They tried to make nice. So we're gonna move on quickly to the rumor portion. So everyone's least favorite rumor monger, Emily Rogers.
I wouldn't say least favorite. I still like her.
I like it too, for the most part.
There we go.
Yeah.
See, we got a couple likers on here.
See, shoot me, but I do.
She reported that the NX prototype has a 6.2-inch 720p multi-touch touchscreen. It's unknown if the product's final size will be larger or smaller than that prototype. The prototype for the dock station has 2 USB ports. Obviously, that number could change with the final product. And MCV's report about Game Freak, obviously the company that makes all the Pokemon games, being involved with the NX has some truth to it, which has led to speculation of a port of Sun and Moon. It's not unheard of for a new Pokemon game to come out a year after the last one.
Yeah.
So it could be a Pokemon game for next year's holiday period. So obviously this is interesting, and I love how she's wording it because she's being very careful about saying, essentially, this is what she's heard. It could all change. It might mean nothing. Mm-hmm. Which I personally respect Emily Rogers for putting this way because she used to be very matter-of-fact like with her statements. And when she was wrong, she looked really bad for being wrong. But that being said, she clearly knows some people. She knows things that other people know.
Yeah.
So this could be true. 720p to me feels fine for a handheld.
Yeah, that's what the Wii U pad runs at, right?
No.
Wii U pad's lower.
Really?
It's like sub 480.
Oh wow.
Or maybe it's 540. I can't remember. Yeah, no, it is not. It is not HD.
Okay.
So for a handheld, that's fine. Obviously, a lot of people say, "Oh, there's 1080p phone." I'm like, yeah, and those things cost like $1,000. So let's just don't compare that kind of thing. Like for a handheld gaming only device, 720p is just fine.
After the friggin' 3DS's screen, 720 is fine.
Yeah, that's way better than the 3DS. The USB ports obviously make sense. That's external hard drives. Extra controllers. Whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever expansions you can do. I mean, USB can be used for so many different things. So all of that makes sense. Not a whole lot. The Game Freak thing is sort of a big deal, and it falls in with the earlier rumor that there would be a Pokemon game on the NX in the first year.
Coliseum 2.
And to kind of build on top of that, this site called Let's Play Video Games, which I had obviously never heard of until this report.
Oh, they're I know about them. They're ex-Destructoid folks.
Yeah, that's what I heard. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Because when I was doing some research, I'm like, oh, why should we really care what they say? How do we know they're not just a random blog? Oh, okay, well, there's people that used to be with Destructoid, and I like Destructoid.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, for people to know, I really love Jim Sterling. He was at Destructoid. That's how I found him.
Yeah.
They had kind of additional rumors to add to the list of stuff that we already know, or we already are led to believe about the NX. Obviously, everything's unconfirmed. Everything we're talking about, none of it might be true. But they add to the rumors from originally from Eurogamer. They say that the NX's detachable controllers will be capable of motion control, and they are extremely similar in fidelity to the Wii Remote Plus.
Skyward Sword HD.
So yeah, that's kind of a big thing here. And the controllers are are specifically in place so they could phase out Wii remotes over time. So Wii remotes just aren't even a thing they sell anymore. Wii remotes will still allow to be used for select multiplayer titles, but will not be supported by all games. Like I think most of the Wii U library supports them.
Yeah, at least
that won't be the case anymore. Like they're literally, finally moving out from the Wii era, but they're still going to let people use Wii. Anyways. NX controllers are going to feature some form of advanced vibration force feedback. It's been described by one source as very similar to the Vive controller, in that it alters the intensity, pulsating patterns, and the duration of vibration to mimic the sensation of a range of different movement types. It's not just one vibration for all situations, which has typically been what Nintendo has done. There's a notable difference between the hard, abrupt feedback of a sword clash or a softer, longer thud of something like hitting a tennis ball. I also suggest that there might be some Wii Sports action going on there. Mm-hmm. Just Dance 2017 will support the NX motion controllers, which makes a whole lot of sense. That's just how they've always done. It's always been with motion controls on Wii. And the Wii remotes are going to be supported for multiplayer, which again makes a lot of sense if it supports Wii remotes. And that Just Dance 17 is going to launch alongside the NX on day one. So, very interesting stuff. It's interesting in that if this is all true, and Nintendo with the NX is trying to move away from the Wii, like it's literally stated here, they're trying to phase out Wii remotes, pretty much trying to phase out the Wii branding. Yet they're basically doing what they've already done.
That worries me.
It's like they're taking the Wii U and Wii. Like to me, it looks like Wii U and Wii. We're just throwing it together and calling it something different. Is what it feels like right now. Now, obviously, the big differentiator here is like, say for some reason it uses a Tegra X2 and it ends up being as powerful as an Xbox One. Like, well, now you're talking a little different because now it's what the Wii U and Wii was, plus it's also what everyone else is, which. That would be nice. I don't know how they could price that to make it affordable. But that's not for me to worry about. That's for them to figure out. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I'm a little worried when I hear this stuff because it's like, yeah, we're not done with motion controls. We're still doing them pretty much exactly the way we did them before.
Well,
and yeah, we have a screen. Enjoy.
The way that I kind of interpret it, like just from what it sounds like, what all the rumors seem to be pointing towards, like some of them might wind up not being true, but I think with like the Eurogamer thing, there's been enough that we're pretty sure they're combining.
A lot of places have heard stuff, and I believe it's all coming from dev units, obviously.
Yeah.
Which as Emily Rogers, as I quoted earlier, noted, dev units don't necessarily mean anything. It could be completely scrapped and redone.
Yeah, it could change, but. From what it sounds like, Nintendo is combining like their handheld and their console. Yeah. Like the NX is supposed to replace both.
Supposedly. Yep.
Yeah, supposedly. So I think that but that does go to Reggie's point earlier too when he said fix the game flow. Like all the games going to one system will help with game flow. Oh yeah, because like the 3DS still gets a bunch of stuff. If everyone's working towards the same thing, you're not going to have any 9-month gaps. It'd be pretty much impossible to screw up that badly.
Yeah, Like, I know a lot of people rag on Nintendo. Oh, they don't make very many games. Like, have you looked at how many games they release a year? It's more than every other company out there.
But it's split
crazy.
between the systems.
It's just split between two systems. But it's crazy how many games that they produce.
Yeah. So, but with that being said, like, if they're going to continue doing that thing, like, they're going to have to, like, the next Pokemon is going to be on the NX. So, I think I kind of like the idea of, from what we've heard of the controllers, that, like, they're detachable and stuff, so you can have, like, the normal controller type situations, but they're also going to have the option for the motion controls.
Yeah.
So that, like, when they do inevitably want to do a Skyward Sword remake or something like that, or if they do want to, like, have, like, the next Mario Kart still have the friggin', like, racing wheel and stuff like that. Like, you can split apart your NX controller and look, two people have steering wheels now. So
yeah, but my worry, I guess, my concern with this whole concept is it doesn't feel like they're really moving on. It feels like they're just living in the past, doing what they've already done.
See,
Except now their handheld games also come to the system.
my fear with that is, like,
I'm sorry, go on.
well, as much, like, as popular as motion controls were, and as relevant, I guess you could call it relevant, as they are now, they're only relevant for one reason right now, and that's because of VR. Like, the only reason that there are motion controls is because of VR. Like, I played a demo of the Vive at GameStop, I think last week, and it was really cool. I couldn't see myself doing something like that without the two Vive controllers. But I don't know if that's something, like, if I come home, like, I have night classes, so I have graduate class that ends at 10:30 p.m. On Tuesdays, and if I'm exhausted, I'm tired, you know, I don't, and I want to just relax and play a game, I'm not going to want to stand up and move around, and it sounds really lazy of me, but I'm not going to want to stand up and move around, like, play, like, something that's going to make me, like, swing my arms wildly. I'm just going to want to sit down with the controller, you know, kind of like I do, like, if I play Tokyo Mirage Sessions, or if I'm feeling like I want to hate myself, I'll play Dark Souls. But that's one of the problems that like, towards the latter half of the Wii, the novelty kind of wore off, and you saw people wanting just a controller. And that's kind of where the gamepad came from, was yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, if I had to, like, place bets or something like that, like, I would guess that after all, like, people want Nintendo to go back to doing more, like, hardcore things, I would guess the emphasis is going to be on, like, normal controls and stuff, but I think they kind of almost have to include motion controls in some aspect, because if they don't, then they can never resell, like, any Wii games on the Virtual Console or anything like that, because you can't play Mario Galaxy without motion controls.
And to be fair, like, for Mario Galaxy, just in specific, a lot of the controls in the game aren't really reliant on the motion. Like, yeah, you do the moves with the motion, but a lot of those moves can just be done with a button.
Well, and the pointer. The pointer.
Yeah, the pointer. But even that stuff, you can find other ways to do it.
Well, and, like, that...
Like, Skyward Sword, Red Steel 2... Those are the kind of games that would be really, really hard to rework with motion controls.
I say that, you say that, but when I played Metal Gear Solid Rising Revengeance, that's such a ridiculous title. I played it, like, I have the option, like, I have the PSI, I have the, you know, move and all that stuff, and as fun as it was to play with that, I got really accustomed to moving with one of the analog sticks, with using the analog stick to aim the sword, and it was just as fun, it was just as easy to do it that way, maybe a little bit more difficult, but at the same time, it's still not one-to-one. Like, as much as Skyward Sword came close to one-to-one, there were still some hang-ups and hiccups, so it wouldn't be that difficult to switch that over to an analog stick and use that to control the like, more precise movements, I guess.
Yeah. My only worry with this concept is they've kind of hinted over time, starting with Mr. Iwata, moving on to the current president, that the NX isn't supposed to replace the Wii and the Wii or the Wii U or the 3DS. Like, it's not supposed to be their next system. And I know we've heard from them, they said the same thing with, like, the DS. It's not replacing the Game Boy Advance, but it totally ended up replacing the Game Boy Advance.
Well, you can't run 3 concurrent systems at the same time.
Yeah, like, there's no way. And the Wii U's getting practically no games. And notice there's not a Wii U Nintendo Direct happening right now. So I kind of look at it as, okay, so if this isn't replacing them, or you claim it's not, it's a new concept. They said new concept. None of this sounds new to me.
Aside from the
literally,
controller.
I said it's Wii U and Wii put together. That's not new to me. I just had that for 2 generations. Like that's my problem. Like how are they going to market this in a way that, like as you said, motion controls have only stayed relevant because of VR.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well this isn't advancing motion controls because it's comparable to Wii Remote Plus, so it's not
there's
even
no
better
VR.
than what we've had.
They said they're not doing VR with this console.
Yeah, they're not doing VR, so it's not advanced. It's not. They're not making advancements in the VR. They're not making the motion controls even more precise. They're not doing anything except saying we're getting rid of the Wii branding. Essentially, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like, according to the rumor anyways, they're phasing out the Wii Remote, which means they're going to phase out the Wii branding, I'm assuming. I just don't... Even if they don't phase out the Wii branding, it feels like... It feels like a mistake. I was excited for the NX, in terms of like it being an all-in-one system that gets all the handhelds, and you could attach it to your TV if you want. You could take it on the go. Like, all that sounded really exciting to me. Now it's like, yeah, but here's the unique feature of it. Its controllers are motion controls, and you don't have to use the motion controls, obviously, because like when you're on the go, it's gonna be hard to hold, prop up a screen in your lap and use motion controls. That's not gonna happen. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but they're obviously gonna heavily advertise the fact that this plays all, this does all the Wii stuff.
Well, I think that's all. Like, I think they could have a really big hit on their hands. All they have to do is say, this is, like, the Nintendo machine. Play games on the go, play games at home. We have our entire freaking library of stuff that you can play. Like, I think...
That'll never happen.
Really, have you looked
at the Wii U and 3DS, just the VC? It's kind of pathetic. If they can't even get a bunch of a huge slate of games on their virtual console today, and they're about to reset it again with a new operating system and a new system, they have yet to really get all their games on virtual console as it is. I'm very hesitant to believe they're going to suddenly have all their games on one system.
You say that, but the list for the NES system, the new NES Mini, whatever's coming out, is really impressive. Like, there's some games
again, that's a system built specifically to play those games.
But those are games that you don't typically find on the Virtual Console, so that's interesting that they're doing that. And I was listening.
Well, most of the big name games in that list are on Virtual Console, right?
Well, I know, but like they're acknowledging that they exist. They're acknowledging that these are games that people want, and so I don't know. I'm hopeful that that's showing a new direction for the Virtual Console for whatever the NX is. But
call me a cynic. I think it's just a cash grab because there's
a
market
cynic,
that wants
but
it.
That's besides the point.
There's a market that wants. It's funny. I'm calling myself a cynic, and I've been accused of being like a Nintendo fanboy defender too.
You're both.
Because I really like the Wii U, but it's like the NES Mini to me. Just it appeals to retro gamers who want to play their retro games in HD.
That thing
with retro controllers.
Like, I don't think I'd call it a cash grab, but it is going to make them a buttload of cash. Like,
it is.
Everyone.
It's just like when you go and buy those Atari things you plug into your TV
better.
and play old Atari games. Well, yeah, it's better, but it's like one of those things. Like, these things already exist. Everyone else does them. Nintendo was eventually going to do them.
but all Nintendo has to do is they put out a single commercial before Christmas time. It's like, look, Nintendo is making all the things from like your childhood that you plug into a TV for $60. Like, every single person's going to go like, I know 5 people that would want that for Christmas, and that's going to be like the Christmas gift. They're going to make stupid amounts of money.
And I think that's ultimately why they did it. I don't think it's got anything to do with Virtual Console. If anything, it makes Virtual Console less appealing because all those games, just the ones they have on there, to buy them individually, someone added it up. It's almost like $200 to buy all those games on Virtual Console. So if anything, it actually makes Virtual Console less appealing because you can get more games for cheaper on a system that also plugs through your HDMI cable.
That is just the NES games, though, and we can talk about if they're going to do a sequel with the Super Nintendo later. But
they got to be doing a sequel.
Like at the end of the day, with the whole NX thing, we've said it before, and we're going to keep saying it until they do a direct for it. They
come on, Nintendo.
Yeah, they really need to go ahead and just get ahead of all this news. Because at this point, there's so much swirling around. There's so much we don't know. There's so much...
I don't know why they're not
Yeah, it's
not why they're not doing.
It can
anything.
only hurt them.
Sony
from
announced
here.
like 2 weeks ago the September 7th event for Neo. They just announced, a 3DS Direct, which obviously let some people down because everyone thought the next time we see Nintendo do anything, it's gonna be for NX. But they need to get out. They are so far behind the 8 ball right now with what's going on in terms of all the leaks and all the information out there. Even if all of this stuff is utterly false, they need to come out and just tell us when we can know. When are we going to know? Not just 2017 or 2016. Sometime for the end of the year, you're going to know.
We'll probably know by the end of the 3DS conference, I'd imagine. Like, they'll be like, stay tuned in the following months, like in October, November. Or they're just going to say, stay tuned for more exciting news later.
Or there's going to be Nintendo. No one's going to be watching the thing, and then at the end, they're going to unveil the NX, and everyone's going to be like, what? Well, why?
Wasn't there like
why did you not talk about this?
Wasn't there a rumor that they're doing a press event or something in September?
Yeah. They were saying the rumor is that they're supposed to have some sort of event in September. Well, we should know if they're having an in-person event soon because media invites should be heading out either this week or next week for it.
Yeah.
And there's no way in heck some media member is going to mention they have an invite to a press event. There's no way in heck that's. I mean, I'm hoping Nintendo sends out an email, to all like Club Nintendo people or something, like advertises that this event's happening before they send the press invites. But this is Nintendo. That's not going to happen. But they just need to get out ahead of this thing and just at least let people know when we can know. So all these rumors and all the speculation keep going on, but we'll have the peace of mind of knowing, hey, we don't have to just talk about rumors anymore as of this day. Like, we will finally know what this thing is. So Nintendo, get on top of that. We're going to move on. We let that spill over. I let it spill over because we don't have a lot of fan topics this week. I had some issues with Facebook, which I will not go over right now. Public does not need to be aware. But we're going to kind of combine our last segment. We're only going to go over one fan topic, and then we'll get into what our favorite thing from the past week was in video games. So the fan topic that I chose this week is from someone who sent it in last week and we just didn't get to. Anthony Angel Duarte. I really apologize if I butchered that last name. I've often wondered why Nintendo doesn't recycle game engines to make quicker games. I'm assuming it means make games more quickly. Or direct sequels in the same way that Majora's Mask was done on the N64. Why not make a Wind Waker sequel with the same graphics and mechanics, just polish further and experiment more? Why build an entirely new system that will take forever to build and polish, rather than use what you spent time on for at least one more game on that same system?
I know he's talking about Zelda games here, but they do this for like New Super Mario Brothers.
Yes, they do this for a lot of games.
Yeah.
Zelda's like the one they don't.
Yeah, I actually I like the Zeldas kind of being a more unique thing with like a few exceptions of like Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. And then they did do that for Majora's Mask, but I really like how they did it in Majora's Mask where they made it like relevant to the plot and everything, that a lot of stuff was reused and twisted from Ocarina of Time. Like it was saying something that they did that. It wasn't just because of budget reasons. Or rather, they had the budget reason, and they decided to justify it by okay, we'll make the game around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I sorry, excuse me. There's a couple things I look at this. First, I find it really interesting, Anthony. You brought up the Wind Waker because they were actually making the Wind Waker 2, and in case you weren't aware, that got canceled after the current president of Nintendo, who was at the time the CEO of Nintendo of America, basically called up Eiji Noma and said, look, you can't do the Wind Waker 2. People in the United States are not going to like it. They do not like the current Wind Waker.
Which is weird because it's one of the most beloved games now.
It is, but at the time, way back in 2003, it was not very well liked in the West. People were very upset over that art change.
Yeah, I loved it.
There were plenty of people that liked it, but at the time, it just was not critically received well by the fan base. So that's why Twilight Princess ultimately ended up coming out and ended up being the art direction that it was. But forgetting that for a moment, financially, I kind of look at why Nintendo might consider not doing this as much. Majora's Mask sold way less than Ocarina of Time. Spirit Tracks sold way less than Phantom Hourglass. Triforce Heroes sold way less than A Link Between Worlds. Almost in every situation with Zelda where there's a sequel using the same system, the same art direction as a prior game that just released before it, it has sold terribly.
I wouldn't say terribly. It just hasn't sold as well as the other games.
It's been bad. Majora's Mask at the time was the worst selling Zelda game in the series. It's not anymore, but it was at the time.
Yeah.
Spirit Tracks was literally in bargain bins a week after it released, being discounted for 50% off in Japan. And A Link Between Worlds barely crossed. I'm sorry, not Between Worlds. Triforce Heroes barely crossed 1 million in worldwide sales, which would make it the lowest selling Zelda game of all time. It is like if that's not the definition of terrible selling Zelda games, then there is never been a terrible selling Zelda game, because those 3 titles all sold like crap. And even if you look at Majora's Mask 3D, it sold way less copies than Ocarina of Time 3D did.
You also have to consider the budget that they spent on those games weren't really that, like... I don't know, like, as we know that...
Here's the weird thing about some of those games. A lot of people that like Majora's Mask think it's better than Ocarina of Time, or it is one of the best games ever made in terms for Zelda. A lot of people that don't like Phantom Hourglass love Spirit Tracks. I think it corrects all the issues Phantom Hourglass had. So Triforce Heroes is a little bit of an odd one because it's doing like not really experimental. They've done multiplayer before, but it's doing a multiplayer thing with the Link Between Worlds engine. So that one to me is maybe a little bit hard to compare compared to say Spirit Tracks and Majora's Mask. But at the same time, like those games are both considered, Majora's Mask and Spirit Tracks, to be pretty high quality Zelda games. So like even like with budget slashed and in terms of like Majora's Mask being rushed out the door, having 1 year to make it, there's like the experiences didn't seem to be negatively impacted. I think what happened. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, go on.
No, I was gonna say I think Nintendo is like a smart enough company that they know like how to make good stuff out of like constraints like that. But the problem is like advertising to the public. It's like, yeah, this game looks almost the same as our last one, but like
it's not. It's got time mechanics in it. It's not even Hyrule or Spirit Tracks. You're on a train. Like you're. You know, for all the reasons that people dislike those games, are a lot of the reasons that the people who love them love those games. And what they've done, and maybe this is probably part of the problem, is with these games, the few times that they've done it with Zelda, they've done something radically different with those games compared to the games that used the art style before. And the problem is, when you use the same art style as used in a prior game, it brings along the expectations of that prior game. And Majora's Mask was nothing like Ocarina of Time. Spirit Tracks was a little bit like Phantom Hourglass, but it, in general, outside of the one dungeon concept it had that it totally improved upon from Phantom Hourglass, it's a lot different than Phantom Hourglass is.
Well, and a lot of the games use an
plus it takes
upgraded
place
engine.
all on land compared to on sea, but and obviously Triforce Heroes, as I previously mentioned, is way different than Only Between Worlds. So I think there's a couple of ways I go with this. One, I think Nintendo should do it more often because it's cheaper to do, and they can get sequels out faster. But I think it has to be something they plan to do before they release the original game. Like, they have Breath of the Wild coming out now. I think if they were going to reuse that art style and do another open-world Zelda game that brings on the expectations of Breath of the Wild, they'd have to already be planning it out right now. Otherwise, what they're going to do is a game that they throw together in 2 years. That's a totally different concept. That ends up being like Majora's Mask. It's probably still a really good game, but it's not going to live up to the huge expectations Breath of the Wild had. And it's going to let people down who are kind of looking for that Breath of the Wild 2, as it were. Because if you look at a lot of other franchises, Zelda's really weird in this way. Zelda changes art directions a hell of a lot.
Oh, yeah.
From game to game.
No other series that I can even think of out there does this. Not even within Nintendo's own stable of IP. Most of their franchises are, you know what to expect from the looks every game. And those looks bring along expectations. Like when you play a 2D Mario game, you just by looking at it, you already know what kind of gameplay to expect. You look at a 3D Mario game, just by looking at it, you already know what the gameplay is going to be like. You look at a Zelda game, you have no idea. Because all the games are so different from each other and have all these different visual elements. And I personally, I think it's kind of hurt the sales of the series. I've always felt that way. Because if you look at the games that have sold the best, it's always been the games that have kind of stuck to a progression of a specific type of art style, rather than the experimental ones like Skyward Sword, The Wind Waker, even A Link Between Worlds. didn't really sell that well comparatively to some of the prior handheld games. It's kind of weird. It's just weird how Nintendo does it and how they keep the different art styles, which I like. I know that Josh here said that he really liked that Nintendo does this as well. But I do agree with Anthony that they probably should do more sequels because, one, it gets games out faster. The games don't take as long to make. And two, I think that it's just something they need to plan to do before they release the first game. Like they could do kind of what Mass Effect has done. You create a trilogy of games, but the series isn't over. You're just moving on from that arc of the story. And they could do that in Zelda. They've tried to do that in Zelda with Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, and the Wind Waker. That's kind of all one arc of a story. And Spirit Tracks kind of starts the beginning of a new arc that never goes anywhere. Yeah. At least to date, there has been nothing to come after the Maladus stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it. As even back in the day, like originally, A Link to the Past, Zelda 1, and Zelda 2, all those games were basically one giant story arc. And obviously now with all the timeline and stuff, it's gotten all muddled. And apparently Link died, and Ocarina of Time started a new timeline. So I don't know what's going on. That's not what I saw when I was a kid. But yeah, so I think if Nintendo actually plans it out to be like not necessarily leave you unfulfilled in the first game, because there's like when I played Uncharted, the original Uncharted, I didn't feel like I was unfulfilled at the end of the game. Like, that's it. That's the game.
Yeah.
And Uncharted 2 naturally picked up from where Uncharted 1 left off. Like, that's what they could do with Breath of the Wild. It could be Breath of the Wild 1, Breath of the Wild 2, and Breath of the Wild 2 just picks up from where you left off. And there's just more stuff happening. But, again, Nintendo has never done this with Zelda games. I can't think of any Zelda game where it's been planned out to be a sequel.
See, here's
Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons don't count. They were simultaneous released by a third party. So.
Well, my confusion is not necessarily that they make new game engines, but that they, with each, like if they use the same game engine, then they keep the same like graphics, if you know what I mean, like the same art style. Yeah. Because you don't have to do that. Like if you look at, as for better or for worse, Konami has the Fox engine. And so, like, games like Pro Evolution Soccer look vastly different than Metal Gear Solid 5.
Of course they do.
Which look different than PT, which look different than Silent Hills, or whatever have you, I don't know. But they look different. They don't have to have the same art style. Like, there are certain limitations that each engine has, but I think that the benefit to having one engine that you use is that you can upgrade the engine. You don't have to completely tear it down and then build up another one. And I've always, they've talked about why they do that, and it's always still been a little confusing as to why they don't just, like, improve upon a certain game engine. But, Nintendo's Nintendo, and they'll do what they want to do. I'd like to see more games with the same engine, maybe even with a different art style or more refined art style. Like, for example, like if we saw Skyward Sword run with the Breath of the Wild game engine, that'd be pretty cool.
So we're just going to move on to... Thank you for your topic. I believe it was Anthony. Yeah, Anthony, thank you for your topic. We'll get up a better thread next time around for people to get some whole new topics in. If you're interested in fan topics, our last episode of the podcast was literally nothing but fan topics. We had a lot of good ones, so you can go back and listen to some stuff from that. So... for the last part of this, it's obviously our favorite thing from the last week. Mine's really short and sweet. My favorite thing that happened in video games last week was the release of Madden 17 and the release of World of Warcraft Legion as of today, the recording of this podcast. I love game releases, and those are two games I love. I know people can get mad at me about Madden. I don't really care. It's buggy. It's got issues. I love it anyways. So, you guys, what's your favorite thing from the past week in video games?
Go for it, Josh.
I'm trying to remember what even happened this week.
You drank some coffee this morning.
Come back to me. I forget what happened.
Okay.
You gotta go hit up NeoGAF quick.
I know mine. Two games that I can't afford right now. I wish I could. Two games that I've been waiting for a very long time were released this week, which is Attack on Titan: Wings of Freedom for PS4 and Steam. And then God Eater 2 Rage Burst, which I know that are completely like niche games for specific people, but they've both got really good reviews. Overall rating on Steam for God Eaters 9 out of 10. Attack on Titans 9 out of 10. And I know those are still early reviews, but they're getting pretty good reviews. I really want to get them. I've followed the production of these games for a while, and they look really, really, really good. I really wish I could afford both of these games right now. But that was really exciting because I think I talked about these way, way long ago about how excited I was for God Eater 2. It looks a lot like what you'd expect if you combined Attack on Titan and Monster Hunter. And if that doesn't sell you on it, then you're fine.
Just not your type.
Yeah,
it's just not your type of game.
But it does sound really cool and really interesting, and so I'm really excited for these games.
There's nothing wrong with being into niche games. There's some I'm really into too. Josh,
I figured it out. I remember it. The Dark Souls 3 expansion pack got announced, and
there's a lot of people hyped for that.
I am so excited. I loved Dark Souls 3
the boomerang shield.
Oh my gosh, that looks so cool! And
I still need to finish Dark Souls 3.
It's so good. That was my entryway into the series. I'd seen people play 1 and 2, but I'd never really gotten to them myself. And then Dark Souls 3 I got addicted to, and then Bloodborne's probably my favorite game of the decade. It was so good. And everything looked really good in the DLC.
So there we go. So our favorite thing of the past week, a whole bunch of game releases and announcements.
None of them had to do with Nintendo.
There's that 3DS
the Galaxy
thing.
3DS.
Galaxy 3DS.
So exciting.
And there's a new Nintendo Direct. Yes, yeah. Oh, 3DS. Well, all right. That's going to do it for this week on the Zelda Informer podcast. I want to thank our special guest Josh for joining us this week.
Woo.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks Alfred as well for making it in this week. I actually have to talk to you, Alfred. Remind me later after the podcast.
Uh-oh.
We have to change our recording time again.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll figure that all out. It's been a great one. You guys have a good night, and listeners, have an amazing rest of your week. Enjoy that 3DS thing that's happening.
Yep.
Stars, galaxies, all that.
Yes.
All right, catch you guys all later.
Bye.